Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Thanks for joining us today because we have a very special guest. This is Robin Porter, Chief Analog Designer for Neve. It's great to see you.
Hello, good. Nice to be here.
Tell us about the company in those days and how you got started.
I had a friend, John, and he was working for the company because his mother was working for the company as well as a secretary. And he said, I'm going to uni, but I've had this summer job. Would you like to take it over? Because I thought it'd be right up your street. I'd never heard of Neve at all. They gave me a job and I sort of took over for what John, we were just T-boys basically. We would do the stuff that needed doing that was pretty repetitive. This is 1972. I ended up being there for about 2.5 years and getting to know the products and getting to know how stuff was made and all that sort of stuff. But then I decided that I really wanted to go a bit further.
The rumor on the internet is to be believed the first project you actually worked on was the Montserrat console?
No, what happened was I did a small job with Rupert Neve then, and that was a little suitcase mixer. And it was quite interesting because it was the first time that you sort of had a transportable Neve, because up until that point these things were very heavy,
right.
And you couldn't really transport a BCM-10 around or anything like that. So that was my first project with Rupert, and then the second project was Montserrat.
Okay.
That one.
Yeah. It's funny how that's all come back around now because, of course, home studios, smaller format consoles, harken back to that, whereas the large format consoles, of course, are still a big thing for Neve as well.
Yes, they are. George Martin and Rupert were very good friends because George Martin had, by that time, I think he had probably bought about 3 Neve consoles, and Rupert was still part of the company. A deal was struck, as they say.
Yeah.
Montserrat console was sort of formed, basically. Because Jeff Emmerich and George Martin wanted something special, then Rupert really did put his mind to it to make sure that this console was very, very special, really. As we went through, sort of from 1966, when the first Transformers, he was producing the first Transformers, and then all the way through the 70s, early 70s, they were refined. They got better and better and stuff. How they did it. But by the time it came to Montserrat, Rupert really had got Transformers down. He knew exactly what performance he could get out of a design. There was a new transformer that was just coming into fruition at that point, and that was a toroidal transformer. And the toroidal transformer, it didn't come to audio first. It came to mains transformers. Just converting mains into a voltage, so that you could run gear off of it. And the reason why that they became very popular was that they are more efficient, basically. Put it in layman's terms, they're more efficient than an E-core. So he thought to himself, well, if that's the case, then maybe this is an interesting time to try and design some transformers, or toroidal audio transformers, and that's exactly what he did. So with the toroidal transformers and the 5534s and these things, this sort of, and also, of course, Jeff Emmerich having a great amount of input into the bands of the frequencies for the equalizer. Incredibly important they are, really, because it's one of the sculpting tools that you use a measurable amount, and it can be for a guitar, it could be for a piano, it could be for a certain tom-tom or a certain snare. You've got to be able to pick out those frequencies, either the ones that you want to highlight more or the ones that you want to get rid of, because it's not producing the sound that you want. Rupert sort of gave the designs to us, and basically we were the ones that sort of then built it. That was how it was done, really.
Wow.
I did the design for the switching unit. Very boring, really. It's got just the auxiliary pots on it, but it had a stepped pan control, not a variable one. I was also the test engineer, because I'd come back from university by this time and had gone from being a T-boy to actually working in engineering. And so I was a test engineer for the first console. Graham Woods was he was a project engineer. He's the guy that got it all together, did all the systems drawings, and pulled it all together. And then, of course, the modules and everything were made in Scotland, in our factory in Kelso. And then the frame was built in Neve, and then it all gets put together, and then it ends up in the test department. And that's where I sort of took it on from there.
Wow.
It was very, very difficult. I used to get very depressed because you think you've got it nailed, and then you come in the morning and switch it on, and then there'll be a puff of smoke from this console that's sitting there, and you go, oh God, because all the meters would pin, because the whole thing had taken off. It's a system problem that you've got to master, and it's very hard because there's so much at play in the systems of consoles that
Sure.
you've got to do. And so, but we finally nailed it, but it took a long time before that happened. But it was worth it because the recorded albums that came off the consoles, everybody was absolutely astonished how amazing the sound was that came from those. And they are very revered, and I think any of them that come up for sale, they command a lot of money.
Yeah, right.
Much more than 8078 ever does.
That's sort of the pinnacle of that era's analog design.
Yeah. After that, he left and then went and started some new companies. And I didn't see him for quite a few years, but I did remain in contact with him.
One of the interesting things is, of course, there's the legacy of Neve dating back to those fantastic classic analog designs. But then there was also the introduction of the partnership with AMS and the digital control and all that brought into it, which brings us more into the modern era with some of those consoles. That whole partnership really opened up a whole new world for Neve.
Neve had been doing quite a lot of work during the late 70s and 80s and the 90s. Up until that point, all music really was a sort of a concert, if you like, of the engineer and all the musicians within the control room would be at this recording console, and they'd all have certain jobs that they had to do throughout the track. Somebody had to push these faders up at a certain point.
Right.
Somebody's had to mute these channels at a certain point. Somebody had to pull the master fader down at this point. And so obviously automation is very important. That you didn't have to do that, and that you could still do it if you wanted, but you could now have one person that could bring that track up, mute that track, change the level of this, but through the automation of the computer. And I don't like computers very much. They're not really my cup of tea. I have to live with them. Once you've taught it to do something, it will do it day in, day out, forever and ever and ever.
Right.
If you go to a company that make stamp out metalwork, they have CNC machines which just do it day in, day out,
right.
And that's a computer doing that. And once you've taught it, it will never make a mistake. It's not digital signal processing, and that's where sort of AMS come from. They don't come from an analog background like Neve, because obviously it goes way back. They took a different approach because they realised that the technology was there. Those are two technologies that sort of came together, had a backbone really to it, to the way in which the sort of company products went from then on in.
Right. Leading up to the 88M audio interface and the 8424 console that we have here, and all the incredible consoles and things that Neve has produced since. Fantastic stuff. Fantastic stuff. So looking back, if you had to pick a favorite, which one would you pick?
Oh gosh, it's very difficult really. Montserrat was. I was very privileged and very happy to have been part of that.
Right.
Really, and equally, 88R was very bold. Really, you've got to understand it was in a period. It was like this was the late 90s. Studios it was on a tipping edge. Would they stay analog, or would they go completely digital? That was very difficult. To spend all this time and money on developing a console that followed on from the VR to making a new one. Really.
Right.
Fortunately, I think the bet, if you like, paid off. First 88Rs we made were in 2000, and we sold in 2000, and they're still working today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so Sony Music in Japan, they have 4 of them, and they're working every single day. And then in London, Air was one of the first adopters, working every day. This
Right.
is like, and so these consoles that are 22 years old,
Right.
you know, but that's the proof of the pudding, really, is that, you know, there's that investment, that amount of money for that console was worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's paid, you know, for its keep. It's,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Right.
So yes, I was very happy with the 88R, because it was the first console that appeared on the market, which was solely designed for 5.1 mixing and recording.
Right.
So it had 5.1 panning, 5.1 monitor as well, and
Right.
and also improved sonics over the VR, and also improved reliability, which goes to prove it, you know, from having a console that's
20-some years old.
20 something and still working as we speak.
Yeah.
The other thing, of course, is that I nicked the idea that Jeff Emmerich and George and Rupert had about this remote mic pre,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, because that was such a good idea, that I would incorporate it as an option on the 88R as well. Microphone signals are very low. Some of them are very low, so you're trying desperately hard to capture them as they are, and you don't want any frequency response problems, and you don't want any noise and everything like that. So having them out there in the studio is very important. But the other reason, when you're allowed to actually sit in and watch a recording session happening, console doesn't, once it's set up and once the cues have been set and once you've got the levels set and everybody's happy and everything's been recorded correctly, not a lot happens with the console. It just sits there, really, and it's like it almost disappears because, well, it doesn't disappear because it's a huge, great behemoth piece of metal.
Right.
But it almost disappears because they actually are there and they start arguing about what they're there for, which is about recording music,
Mm-hmm.
and either getting it to be the correct sound and intensity and everything they want, or it could be that the piece of music doesn't work and it needs to be rewritten, you know, and so there's the intellectual part of it happening as well.
Right.
But the console doesn't really get touched. You know, the faders might move a bit, but that's it. And so consequently, I looked at it and I sort of seen that they're not using a lot of EQs and they're not using a lot of the dynamics. What I thought I'd do would be I could make channels that didn't have the microphone preamplifiers in, so they could be dual line. And if they were dual line, then they could be used as more line inputs,
Mm-hmm.
okay, or they could be used for pre-records, you know, or keyboards or things like that. And then you wanted some microphones, but they could be out on the stage. And so you could have this hybrid type of arrangement where all the line inputs, the dual line inputs would control the microphone preamplifiers because they've still got a microphone knob.
Right.
But the microphones are out there, not in the, and so you got another input,
Mm-hmm.
effectively for free. And also the other thing about it was that the big technology has moved on, and of course the computers now had RS485 or Ethernet connections, so everything could be controlled remotely that way. There didn't have to be phantom power voltage in order to change the gains
Right.
of the microphone preamplifiers, so that made life a lot easier on that point of view. And the other thing, of course, is that you could now got a computer where you could write an app to control it. So not only could you control the gain, but you could control the phase, you know, you could control the pad, and all of those things could be remotely controlled from the console as well. And also you could lock it out so that nobody in the studio could go up to it and mess with it. They couldn't change the gains, they couldn't
Right.
do anything to it. It was all under the control of the engineer in the control room on the console, and so that was another, you know, important part of it, really. Mm-hmm. And again, the other thing was you didn't have to have just one type of microphone preamplifier. You could choose. You could have the Montserrat microphone preamplifier with a toroidal input transformer and the 255-34s as the gain stages with the FET, the FET gaining, as
Right.
was done on the Montserrat. You could have that type, or you could have 1081. 1081 is Class AB, the good old standard microphone preamplifier, 8048, being a typical example of that style of things. And they are absolutely, and they're wonderful microphone preamplifiers for drums. They are really good for that. So Montserrat preamplifier is much more precise, much more clear, and has air, to it. It's really wonderful for orchestra recording and jazz and stuff like that, where you want to capture ambience, and that all becomes part of that wonderful sound. But then you could have a studio where you don't do those sort of jobs. You're a rock and roll studio, and it could be Rolling Stone stuff, and you want 1081 because that gives it that wonderful, tight, punchy sound that you get emulated, from the sort of 8048 type of range of Neve consoles. So with that and the 1073 one, you could choose, what you wanted, So that was one of the other things with the 88R that I was really pleased with. It worked out really, really well.
Yeah.
And of course, we're still making it.
Sure.
As well, and that's like 23 years on.
That's an amazing run.
Yeah.
Yeah, an amazing run. And congratulations on your long tenure and all the amazing projects you've been involved with, and the success you've had with these incredible consoles and all the outdoor gear and things that go with it. And it's such a pleasure to have you here with us at Sweetwater. It's been a real treat.
Thank you very much for having me.
You bet.
Really appreciate it.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you for joining us here at Sweetwater. I'm Mitch Gallagher.